The Pacific Ocean is the largest graveyard on Earth. Beneath its vast, glittering surface lie the bones of countless ships, destroyers, carriers, submarines, once fierce weapons of war, now silent ruins cloaked in darkness. These wrecks are not just steel and rust. They are frozen moments in time, snapshots of battles where men fought, bled, and vanished without a trace. Some of these ships have names etched into history. Others slipped quietly into obscurity, their stories buried beneath crushing pressure and endless waves. To divers and historians, the Pacific is a treasure chest of forgotten tales, but one story rises above the rest. A tale so strange it sounds like a myth whispered by sailors in the dead of night. It is the story of a ship that refused to stay dead. Scuttled by her own crew to avoid capture, she was resurrected by the enemy, forced to sail under another flag, and turned against the very nation that built her. To Allied sailors, she became a phantom, an impossible sight on the horizon, a ship that should not exist, yet did. This was no ordinary wreck. This was the USS Stewart, the destroyer that became known as the ghost ship of the Pacific. And when modern explorers uncovered her final resting place, deep beneath California's cold waters, they realized the ocean had been guarding not just a wreck, but one of the strangest stories of World War II. The Pacific Ocean, an endless expanse of blue, stretching further than the eye can see. But what if I told you that beneath its calm, sunlit surface lies a graveyard, not of bones, but of steel? Scattered across atolls and hidden in lagoons, dozens of war machines sleep in silence. These are not ordinary wrecks. They are relics of one of the most devastating wars in human history, World War II. Time has claimed them. Coral now creeps across their decks, seaweed drapes like funeral shrouds, and fish swim through gun turrets once aimed at enemies. But each twisted hull and broken mast whispers a forgotten story, a story of men who once lived, fought, and died aboard them. For decades, the Pacific's ghost fleet remained untouched, sealed away in watery tombs. Locals knew of their presence, rusting shadows seen on clear days through shallow waters, or the eerie outlines visible when the tide fell low. But for outsiders, they were myths, rumors told by divers and fishermen, stories almost too haunting to believe. Some say these ships are cursed, guarded by the restless spirits of sailors who never left their posts. Others see them as time capsules, frozen in the exact moment war ended, preserving a battlefield that the ocean swallowed whole. And yet, the ocean never truly erases. It hides. It waits. And when explorers finally dove deep into the Pacific's forgotten lagoons, what they found was nothing short of unbelievable. Whole fleets, destroyers, bombers, submarines, cargo ships, still resting as if the war had ended yesterday. These ships, scattered across the Pacific, are not just wrecks. They are chapters of history, waiting for us to open them again. And as we dive deeper into their stories, we discover not only the machines of war, but the human sacrifices carved into their steel. Beneath the waves, the Pacific keeps its secrets. But for how long? Long before it became a silent wreck on the ocean floor, every warship had a beginning, a birth, a moment when steel, sweat, and fire fused together to create what many sailors would call their second home, and, sometimes, their final grave. In the early 1940s, as the world drowned in the chaos of World War II, American shipyards worked around the clock. Sparks flew like stars as welders fused massive plates of steel. Riveters hammered without pause, their rhythm echoing like war drums. Out of this symphony of industry rose the sleek, lethal shape of the destroyer, a ship designed to hunt submarines, escort carriers, and guard fleets with relentless speed and firepower. Each destroyer was more than a machine. It was a promise of protection for convoys, a blade against enemy fleets, and a symbol of America's industrial might. Men watched in awe as the towering hulls slid into the water for the first time, christened with a bottle of champagne and the cheers of proud families. To them, these ships were not cold steel. They were guardians, warriors of the sea. But behind the celebration was an unspoken truth. Every launch was also a gamble with fate. No one knew how long the ship would last, or how many battles it would see before meeting its end. The Pacific was unforgiving, and the destroyer's destiny, whether triumph or tragedy, was sealed the moment it touched the water. Sailors assigned to these ships quickly learned that life aboard was both exhilarating and brutal. The decks were cramped, the air thick with oil and salt, the sound of engines a constant heartbeat. Yet there was pride. Pride in belonging to something greater than oneself. Pride in standing on steel that could cut through storms and face enemy fire. Every destroyer carried not just torpedoes and guns, but also the hopes, fears, and dreams of hundreds of young men. They slept in hammocks above ammunition stores, ate rations in narrow mess halls, and carved graffiti into bulkheads that, decades later, might still rest in the deep. When war erupted in the Pacific, these ships sailed into danger with flags high and hearts steady. But destiny is never kind to all. Some destroyers would return home in glory. Others would vanish in fire and fury, claimed by the sea. And it is their bones, rusting in silence, that today form the ghost fleet lying beneath the Pacific's waves. The story of one such destroyer begins here. A ship that would see fire, chaos, and betrayal by the very ocean it sailed. February 1942. The Pacific was ablaze. Japan's forces were advancing with terrifying speed, sweeping across Southeast Asia, crushing defenses island by island. And in the waters of Bali, one of the fiercest naval clashes of the early war was about to unfold. The Battle of Badung Strait. The night was thick with tension as Allied ships, a fragile coalition of American, Dutch, British, and Australian vessels, slipped into the strait. Their mission was desperate, to halt Japanese landings on Bali. The odds were grim. The Allies were outgunned, low on supplies, and many of their crews were weary from weeks of unrelenting battle. But surrender was unthinkable. To yield the waters was to yield the Pacific itself. The destroyers led the charge. Sleek and fast, they cut through the dark waters like knives. Searchlights flashed across the waves, and in that instant, the night erupted into chaos. Torpedoes hissed through the blackness. Shells screamed overhead. Explosions lit the strait like lightning, revealing flashes of burning ships and desperate men clinging to survival. On one deck, sailors scrambled to their stations, the acrid sting of gunpowder filling their lungs. Orders were shouted above the thunder of cannons. The destroyer's guns roared back, firing into the void where Japanese silhouettes darted like phantoms. Each moment was life or death. Turn too slowly, and a torpedo would rip the hull apart. Hesitate too long, and enemy shells would find their mark. The battle raged with brutal intensity. Japanese ships, seasoned and coordinated, moved with deadly precision. Allied destroyers fought back with sheer courage, weaving through enemy fire, launching torpedoes into the night. Some found their targets, sending shockwaves across the strait. Others missed, vanishing into the sea's endless darkness. For the men aboard, time lost all meaning. Minutes stretched into eternities as they fought not just for victory, but for survival. Fire spread across decks, metal groaned under the weight of explosions, and the cries of the wounded mingled with the roar of battle. Still, they pressed on. By dawn, the strait was littered with smoke and wreckage. Both sides had suffered, but the Japanese held the advantage. Allied ships, battered and broken, withdrew in grim silence. The waters of Badung Strait became a floating grave for many, their bodies claimed by the tide, their ships left to drift into history. Yet, even in defeat, the courage of those destroyers left a mark. They fought against impossible odds, daring to stand in the path of an unstoppable tide. Their wrecks now lie beneath the sea, silent witnesses to a night of fire and fury few remember. The Battle of Badung Strait was more than a clash of steel. It was a testament to human resolve, sacrifice, and the cruel price of war. And beneath the waves of Bali, those memories remain, etched into rusting hulls and silent guns. The ocean buries many secrets, but sometimes those secrets are disturbed. In the years after the great battles of the Pacific, the warships that had fallen into the sea seemed destined to remain there. Silent tombs for sailors, monuments of rust and coral. But in the aftermath of World War II, not all of these wrecks were left untouched. Some were sought not by friends of the fallen, but by former enemies who saw opportunity glimmering beneath the waves. The twisted hulks of destroyers, cruisers, and tankers were not just war relics. They were treasure troves of steel, copper, and machinery. For nations rebuilding from the ashes, a sunken fleet was a fortune waiting to be plundered. And so, divers and salvagers, some operating in shadows, descended into the depths. Imagine it. The eerie stillness of an underwater graveyard suddenly pierced by the hiss of blowtorches and the dull thud of explosives. Hulls were cut open, steel ripped away piece by piece, as if the dead ships were being exhumed against their will. The ocean, once their resting place, became a battlefield again, this time between history and hunger. But not all salvagers sought only profit. Some were spies, combing wrecks for lost secrets of enemy technology, radar systems, torpedo mechanisms, or codes that might still be locked inside corroding safes. For them, each dive was a mission, each wreck a vault of knowledge left behind by the fallen. To locals who watched from the shores, the sight was chilling. Great ships, long thought buried by time, suddenly re-emerged in fragments, hauled to the surface by the very powers they once fought. It was as if the ghosts of war had been awakened, dragged back into a world that had already moved on. Yet with every salvage, something was lost forever. Plaques, guns, and artifacts that once told stories of sacrifice disappeared into private hands or vanished into scrapyards. The dignity of the dead was disturbed, their memorials broken apart. These ships, meant to rest in peace, were forced to live again, not as warriors, but as commodities. And perhaps that is the cruelest resurrection of all. Not the honor of remembrance, but the theft of history itself. Still, not every wreck was stripped away. Some escaped this fate, too deep, too dangerous, or simply forgotten by those who sought them. These survivors remain today, ghostly silhouettes beneath the waves, guarding their secrets and daring us to remember. The question lingers: when we disturb the graveyards of war, do we awaken history or desecrate it? They call it the Phantom of the Pacific. Not a ship, not a man, but something far harder to explain. Across the scattered islands and lagoons of the Pacific, divers, fishermen, and even soldiers have whispered the same unsettling tales for decades. Stories of shadows moving where no living thing could be. Stories of ghostly voices carried on the wind. Stories of ships that shouldn't exist, appearing on the horizon, sails or funnels glimmering in the moonlight, only to vanish when the eye blinked. In Truk Lagoon, where hundreds of Japanese vessels were sent to the bottom during Operation Hailstone, divers have reported strange encounters, the sound of footsteps echoing through flooded hallways, doors creaking shut though no current stirred, and whispers in languages long dead bubbling through their oxygen masks. Some even claim to have seen faces staring back from portholes, faces pale, expressionless, watching silently from beyond the glass. Skeptics dismiss these tales as nitrogen narcosis, the rapture of the deep that clouds the mind when divers go too far. But not every story can be explained away. Fishermen in Micronesia swear that certain waters grow suddenly colder when their nets drift over wrecks. Others say phantom lights dance across the sea at night, like the ghostly glow of ships still signaling to one another in formation. And then there are the legends told by islanders. They speak of the restless fleet, spirits of sailors who never returned home, condemned to wander the Pacific for eternity. For them, the wrecks are not just rust and steel. They are prisons, cages holding men who refuse to let go of their posts. These sailors, they believe, guard the ocean, watching every diver who dares trespass. One tale speaks of a phantom destroyer that appears during storms off the coast of the Solomons. Shrouded in rain and lightning, it cuts across the waves, engines roaring, only to vanish into the squall without a trace. Some say it is a warning, a reminder of battles fought long ago. Others whisper it is the ocean's way of keeping history alive, not in books, but in visions that haunt those who see. What makes these stories so chilling is their persistence. Generation after generation, in place after place, the Pacific refuses to let its ghosts be forgotten. They rise in the minds of the living, like the ships that rise and sink in the imaginations of those who pass over their graves. So the question remains: are these phantoms merely tricks of the mind, born from fear and imagination? Or does the Pacific truly remember, keeping its warriors alive in ways we cannot understand? For in the heart of the ocean, silence is never truly silent, and sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. By 1945, the Pacific had become a vast graveyard. From Pearl Harbor to the Philippine Sea, the ocean carried the scars of endless battles. Ships burned, planes plummeted, and men vanished into waters that seemed eager to swallow every trace of conflict. Yet, as the war reached its final, brutal crescendo, the world could not yet imagine the silence that would follow. The end came not with a whisper, but with two blinding flashes. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. In August 1945, the age of the atom was born, and with it came the collapse of Imperial Japan. The once mighty fleets that had roared across the Pacific lay shattered, broken, or trapped in hidden lagoons. Their captains were dead, their sailors gone, their flags lowered forever. Suddenly, the oceans grew still. The thunder of artillery, the scream of dive bombers, the shattering explosions that had rocked the Pacific night after night, all fell silent. For the first time in years, the sea could breathe again. But it was no peaceful silence. It was the silence of aftermath, of wreckage drifting aimlessly, of oil slicks painting black stains across the blue. The Allied victors faced a new dilemma: what to do with the defeated fleet? Some ships were claimed as trophies, hauled back for study. Others were sunk deliberately, used as targets to test the terrifying power of atomic bombs at Bikini Atoll. And countless others were left abandoned, rusting hulks that no one wanted, too damaged to repair, too costly to salvage. For the sailors who survived, the end of the war was not truly an end. Memories of comrades lost in fiery battles haunted them, and for many, the ocean itself became a grave too vast to mourn properly. They would speak of it rarely, their stories carried like secret burdens. Yet the ocean remembered everything. And so, the Ghost Fleet was born. Not by design, but by neglect. Destroyers, cruisers, submarines, even entire convoys slipped into obscurity. They became monuments not of victory, but of endurance and loss. For the war may have ended on land, but beneath the Pacific, its echoes remain eternal. In those wrecks lies the last breath of an empire, the final whispers of a world that tore itself apart. And as the coral creeps over their decks, as schools of fish swim through their hollow corridors, they ask one haunting question of us: was the war ever truly over? Or does it live on, beneath the waves, in steel and shadow? As the once mighty Spanish Armada limped from English waters, storms tore through its battered hulls and hunger gnawed at its desperate crews. Along the unforgiving coasts of Ireland and Scotland, ship after ship was dashed against the rocks, leaving twisted timbers and lifeless sailors scattered across the shore. Locals whispered of eerie apparitions, phantom galleons that emerged from the mist, sails full though no wind blew, forever wandering the seas they failed to conquer. Yet the Armada's defeat was more than a tragedy at sea. It marked a turning point in history. Spain's aura of invincibility fractured, its empire wounded though not yet broken. England, once vulnerable, now claimed its place as a rising power, draped in the mantle of Protestant defender. The clash of fleets echoed far beyond the battle itself, reshaping the balance of power across Europe for centuries. And still, Spain refused to call it failure, choosing instead to brand the disaster as a divine test. Centuries later, the Armada's bones lie silent beneath the waves, rusted cannons, sunken treasures, shattered dreams. Divers recover fragments that whisper of ambition and hubris, while villagers along the coast still tell of ghostly lights flickering on stormy nights. Perhaps they are just tales, or perhaps the Armada's restless souls still drift, caught between triumph and ruin. But what do you think? Were they merely sailors lost to time? Or does their spectral fleet still haunt the horizon, waiting to be heard? The Pacific's forgotten ghost fleet is more than a collection of rusting hulls and barnacle-covered guns. It is a silent chronicle of sacrifice, ambition, and tragedy. These ships, once proud titans of steel, now lie entombed beneath the waves, frozen in time as monuments to a war that reshaped the world. Divers describe the eerie sensation of swimming through corridors where sailors once laughed, fought, and died, as if the very walls still breathe with memories of the past. And yet, beyond the wreckage lies something even more haunting: the unanswered questions. How many stories of bravery remain sealed within those iron graves? How many secrets of battles, victories, and defeats are still hidden in the silence of the seabed? Are these relics truly resting in peace, or do they whisper through the currents demanding not to be forgotten? History has a way of leaving shadows that refuse to fade. The Ghost Fleet stands as a reminder that the past is never truly buried. It lingers, waiting for us to listen. So the next time you hear the crashing of waves or glimpse the horizon where sea meets sky, remember, beneath those waters lie ghostly legacies of men and machines that once fought for survival, now speaking only in whispers. If you want to uncover more hidden histories, more tales of forgotten legacies and haunted pasts, stay with us. Because the ghosts of time are not silent. They are waiting for someone like you to hear their story.